Well, today we're in Perkins at the Horticulture Research Station, and we're visiting with Dean McCraw. Dean is the Extension Pecan Specialist for OSU, and Dean, thank you for letting us come out today.
Glad to do it. Glad to do it.
Now, Dean, we thought we'd do a show about pecans because it is pecan harvest season. And what time of year does that happen in Oklahoma? What's our span?
We'll start harvesting some of the earliest varieties in September, and then it runs on through with the natives into January, February, depending on how big the crop is and weather conditions. But say most of it is about the middle of November. Would be right at the peak of harvest right now.
Okay, just in time for Thanksgiving.
Pretty much, that's right.
Now, pecan is that's a big industry in Oklahoma, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We have about 80,000 acres of managed pecans, and we're somewhere usually second nationally in native production and third or fourth in total pecan production. So it's a viable industry here.
Oh. Now, most of our viewers don't exactly grow pecans on a commercial basis, but a lot of them have pecans at home, and a lot of people think that it needs to freeze real hard before you can harvest your pecans. Is that true?
Not necessarily, Brenda. A frost will help just to loosen the pecans and let them dry down, but as far as the maturity of the nut, it doesn't make any difference. So as soon as they begin to separate from the shuck, they can be harvested and then dried, and the eating quality will be just as well as if after it had frosted.
Okay. Now, some people wait until the pecans actually just fall to the ground, but you can actually speed the process up, can't you?
Sure can. After the nut, the shuck splits and the nut separates from the shuck, then anything that you can do to knock the nut off the tree from this type of device here, a frailing a pole that you just knock them off with, to a commercial shaker. Okay. And some gradients in between, but they can be knocked off and it won't hurt the pecans at all.
Now, maybe we can see a demonstration of that. Just
yeah, this is a
pecans
very
off.
highly technical piece of equipment here.
It's very technical.
Yes, it is. But these things, you can buy them at different places. It's just a cane fishing pole, something to allow you to reach up and knock them off. You just take the pole and go up and find the cluster and give it a good solid hit.
So
and the nut's going to hit the ground. You know, clearly it just takes a lot of time, but if you only got one or two trees in the backyard and got plenty of time, it works just as well as anything.
Now, why would you want to do that? Just to keep them from the birds getting them first, or something?
That's right. That's the longer the nut hangs on the tree, the greater will be the chance to lose it to something. So that'd be the biggest reason for doing that. It doesn't matter to the pecan. You know, the pecan can hang out there and it really won't hurt it. As long as it's hanging in the tree, then the quality won't change a whole lot. It changes after they hit the ground, but as long as they're hanging in the tree, it really won't hurt them that much. You're just saving loss to wildlife.
Great. Now, once they're on the ground, we want to pick them up. You can do that by hand. There are several different hand items that you can pick them up with.
That's right. And a lot of the varieties, the variety as opposed to a native, these trees are Merrimack trees, which is a seedling selection, or what's commonly called a paper shell, but it is as opposed to a native. Many of the varieties are hand-picked. Those that are really thin-shelled, if they go through the harvester, it'll crack the shell. So many of those are hand-picked. So they can be hand-picked or with different kinds of mechanical type harvesters, small quantity type yard harvesters that work really pretty well.
Now, Dean, here we're knocking them out of the tree and they're coming out really good, but sometimes people will have a problem with the shuck not opening up to let the pecan fall out. Why would that happen?
That could be a couple of things. The nutritional problem normally that would relate to that would be a shortage of potassium, which is related to shuck opening and shuck split and those kinds of things. There could be other things associated with it. If the shuck turns black, then and it won't open, and then that could be due to scab infection on the shuck, or it could be insect damage. Hickory shuckworm will cause that. But those kinds of things, it varies a lot, but that does happen occasionally.
Okay, so if somebody has this problem, they should maybe bring a sample to their county office and have them try to find out. Yeah,
it would be good to find out what that is, and if it's insect or disease damage, you can tell it pretty readily by looking. If it's something else, then you'd have to do some leaf analysis and work on that. But normally those things can be worked out.
Okay. Now we've kind of seen the way to harvest them if you have one or two trees, but commercially that's not how it's done, is it?
No, it would be prohibitive to do that.
So, well, can we take a look at how we actually harvest pecans commercially?
All right, let's do that.
Now, Dean, to harvest the pecans commercially, it's basically a two-step process, isn't it?
Yes, it is. The first step obviously would be to get the nuts on the ground, to shake them off, and the implement that's used for that is a commercial shaker, and it's a vibrator. Essentially, is what it does is vibrate the trunk of the tree, and there's a series of counterbalanced weights inside it that allow the tree to shake. It's used on a tractor, usually at least a 60 horsepower tractor, so it's a pretty heavy piece of equipment. The mechanism is really very simple. It's a hydraulically operated, and it opens up. Different sizes of shakers will open to accommodate up to a 48-inch tree. But it's going to open up, and it's the padded jaws on it that clamp against the tree, and then the chain that holds the shaker up will be slacked. You let the lift down some to slack the chain so that there's no vibration, or at least very little vibration, that goes to the tractor. Then the power takeoff is turned on and raise the RPM of the power takeoff up enough to shake the tree and physically dislodge the pecans.
Okay, and this doesn't really hurt the tree then?
No, it doesn't, as long as the shaker's well padded, and there are foam pads and as well as canvas pads that go against the bark to pad the shaker so it doesn't slip the bark.
Now, there's quite an assortment of nuts here on the ground, Dean.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can see what variety of nuts we've got here. Actually, what variety of pecan is this?
This is Merrimack. Okay. This is Merrimack. It's a nice seedling selection, actually, from between Stillwater and Tulsa. But it's a good variety for Tulsa and south. Wouldn't want to go much farther north of Tulsa, but you can see a pretty good assortment here of what's on the ground. As you walk in on a variety that's this small, you step on them, or this thin, rather. When you step on them, they'll crack. So, Kelly, you'd want to watch where you step as you walk out onto them. But you can see a pretty good assortment here of some the shucks that used to have the nut in it. This is one that still has the nut in. The pecan is a fruit, and just as a peach or an apple is a fruit. We just eat the seed instead of the fleshy part of the fruit. So, and this is essentially the outer part of the fruit. Then we peel that away, and the nut is in there. And anytime the nut is far enough so it will hang like that, there's nothing that would that the pecan's going to take from the shuck anymore. So, this one just the shuck happened to come off with the nut. We talked about some earlier about some that when they don't open. Here's an example of one that the shuck didn't come loose. You can see on the outer part right there is an exit hole for the pecan weevil. And as we peel into it, there's where the larvae came out of the pecan. So that the egg was laid in there back in the dough stage back earlier in the summer, and that's where it came out. So that's one reason why they wouldn't open. Another, well, this one is just this one's just green. That guy's just green, and it's just not ready to open yet. You can tell that, it's going to open up all right, and but it's just still green. We haven't had that frost to start them to drying down yet, but that one could still be harvested as long as they peel out of there. They could still be harvested. Another assortment here. Here's another one here that we found that come down. This is a hickory shuckworm, which is an insect. We can see right here where the insect is the larvae of the insect tunnels through the shuck and feeds on the shuck and interferes with the fill. And if you have a heavy infestation of that can cause the shucks to not open. But for the most part, we got a pretty good selection here of good nuts on the ground. As bad as, pick them up just like a treasure hunt.
There you go.
Just like a treasure hunt. An Oklahoma treasure about Thanksgiving.
Now, picking them up by hand, but also commercially, these would be picked up mechanically, wouldn't they?
Absolutely, absolutely. They're a machine that would take these and just sweep across the ground, and it sweeps the nuts up onto a belt, and the nuts fall through onto an auger into a hopper, and then the fan blows most of this trash that we see on the ground here will be blown out the back of the machine.
Oh, it looks like a pretty dirty process, doesn't it?
Dirty process is right. mechanical harvester is a fine device, but it picks up everything that's there. So whatever the soil or dirt is there, they pick it up.
So now, once you've got the nuts, and like say we've got these at home, what do we need to do so that so that we can store them properly? What do you need to do to them?
Okay. Probably the biggest thing, the most urgent thing after harvest would be to get the nuts dried down. If we look at what we just harvested, then there's a lot of plant material in there, a lot of leaves and that kind of stuff. This was what was picked up with the push harvester. Would separate out all of the wet material, leaves and all that kind of stuff, and pick the nuts out of that pile. Okay, so we get down to the nuts. We need to ensure that we dry the nuts down after they're harvested as soon as possible afterwards. They'll come off the tree with anywhere from 12 to 15% moisture in them. And in order to prevent mold in storage, we need to dry that down to no higher than 8%, preferably down around 6 or 7%.
Okay, and how would a person go about doing that?
Really, the most effective thing, and it is quite effective, is just to separate them out, put the nuts in some kind of in a mesh bag, like an onion sack or something like that, or even a burlap sack. Put them in that and set them so that they're out of the rain, so they're not going to get rained on under a carport or in a garage or something like that. Ideally, so the air could move across them, and they'll dry on down. But just be sure that there's a minimal amount of trash in with them.
Okay. And once they're dried down, then storing them long term, what's the shelf life on a pecan?
Well, they'll keep, depending on how they're stored, if a pecan is kept at about in shell at about say between 32 and 35 degrees, like you'd find in the refrigerator, in the home refrigerator, they'll keep for 60 days or so, thereabouts, in the neighborhood of 60 days. The lower the temperature you keep them, the longer they'll store. If they're dried down to 5% and then stored at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, they'll keep for almost indefinitely, like a couple of years. There won't be very little, if any, change in quality over that period of time. So they'll keep longer if they are in the shell than if they're cracked. So to the homeowner, then I presume the difference would be if you're going to store in the freezer, say, for a long period of time, you could crack the shell, crack them out, and take the nut meats out. This particular variety here, it may be 51 to 52% kernel. So if you crack it out, then you're saving 48%, say, of the total volume that you'd have to freeze. If we put it in the refrigerator, then it's just a matter of choice whether you want to crack them out or not. But they will keep longer if they're shelled, or if they're in shell versus if they are shelled.
Okay. Now, how would you know that you had them dried down enough? You know, how many days would that take? Or
well, it really doesn't take very long. They'll dry a lot overnight, depending on what the temperature is, of course, and what the air movement is. But you can tell pretty decently what the moisture content is of them if you just crack one out and check the consistency of the kernel that's in there. We can just take just a minute to do that. If we pull one of them, this is from some of the stuff that we just harvested. This is one that was dry. If I pull that loose and I take that kernel there, and if I get a good clean break, then that's dry enough that it could go into storage and wouldn't mold. If, on the other hand, I take a nut of those that were green, let's say this one here is pretty green. It's peels off all right, but it's still pretty green. Now, if I peel that out, let me take these. Losing my collection there, aren't I?
Yeah.
But if I peel this guy out, and we'll see if there's anything in it. That wouldn't be a very good one to peel out, would it?
No.
Not much in there.
Not much there.
Let's look at this guy here. Right here. Peel this one out. See what we got there. If we pull the kernel out of that, and that's a pretty nice nut, isn't it? Still pretty well and dry enough to store.
So if we were
one that's
kind of-
consistently in the shuck. If it's still in the shuck, then it'll be rubbery,
Uh-huh.
and it just won't break cleanly.
So basically that rubbery thing, then they need to be dried a little bit more.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
well, looking here at nut quality, you know, not all pecans are the same. And what are you looking for when you're looking at the actual nut meats?
You know, there's a lot to be said there just about the kernel. If you're looking just at the kernel, generally, the smaller the nut, the better it'll be filled. As a general rule, that's true. Some years that's not the case, but if I look at the pecan, I want to look at a cross section of the kernel, and we can see pretty well here where there's not very much airspace in that one, as opposed to this guy right here. These are different varieties. We can see a little bit more airspace there, so there wouldn't be quite as much quality there, as opposed to a smaller nut, this being a smaller native nut, and the difference in feel there.
Wow.
Normally, as we said earlier, the smaller nut, the better the feel. Another thing that we can talk about with respect to quality is these from this year's crop versus that one from last year's crop, and the difference in color.
Wow.
They do change colors very quickly.
So, now, we're talking about quality, and that leads us to, you actually have a pecan show here in Oklahoma, don't you?
Yeah, we do. The Oklahoma State Pecan Show is conducted every year, and there are county shows. Individuals can call the county extension office to find out about the availability of county shows. If there's not a county show available, then sample can be sent to Oklahoma State University Department of Horticulture to my attention, and we need a 2-pound sample, and those samples would be labeled by variety and grower and those kinds of things, and then we'll judge those out, grade those out, and judge them, and the results will be presented at the Pecan Growers Association meeting next June.
Okay. Well, Dean, we really appreciate this, pretty much a pecan primer today.
Absolutely.
So.
And I'm pleased to do it.
We hope you enjoyed this video. It's part of our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. You can also find more recent videos on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.